Everybody, welcome back to RSA, theCUBE's coverage, RSAC 2026. We're here at Moscone West on the ground floor. Definitely stop by and see us. I'm Dave Vellante. Christophe Bertrand is also here, and I'm pleased to welcome back to theCUBE Sumit Dhawan, who is the CEO of Proofpoint. Good to see you again.
Good to see you again, Dave.
Thanks
For having me.
We've seen you in New York, we've seen you here every year. But it's not Groundhog Day.
You can't get rid of me.
Everything changes though, right? I mean,
it does.
It's like, this industry is amazing. Every 3 months, it's something new that you got to stay on top of. So you guys are making some acquisitions. So let's start with the update. I mean, since the last time we saw you, you've acquired Acuvity, right? What was the rationale behind that? Give us the overview. What have you been doing these days?
These days, it's actually exciting times. We were talking about it. AI, it's sort of created a lot of questions and almost no busy minute because you're always thinking about something. But also it's exciting, it's really exciting. Now, having said that, Acuvity is an acquisition we closed a few weeks ago, and last week we released our first integrated product called Proofpoint AI Security. The whole thesis behind that, Dave, was quite simple. If you look at the risks that enterprises have that got created for humans, humans were socially engineered, and humans are the biggest source of data exfiltration. Okay, AI extends the same problem at a much, much, much bigger surface area. And AI is supposed to mimic humans, artificial intelligence, right? So it's mimicking human intelligence. But AI is susceptible, even in a bigger way, to the risks of social engineering. It's called prompt engineering. And the fact that AI can mishandle data and credentials, okay? So we looked at this problem and we said, well, what is the fundamental problem with AI securing this AI? If it's similar to human, the risks are similar. And we said AI needs a framework of guardrails. By definition, humans are trusted in the enterprise, okay? And they have a code of conduct. All of us have code of conduct, or most people at least say they do. With AI, it doesn't understand code of conduct. And so as a result, if you're going to trust AI, you have to have some guardrails on top of it. Guardrails that are intent-driven. They can't be just, hey, this AI has access to this information. No, it needs to know exactly what it's doing with the information. And that's what Acuvity was, and that's what our models were, and we combined the two together to introduce Proofpoint AI Security.
Is it harder, easier, or just different in terms of being able to fool machines versus humans?
I think it's early, so I would say the good news is that we are seeing simple form of threats today. But I do think it's going to get more sophisticated and the challenge will become bigger. Because think about it, with humans, we are able to stitch together the context. Now we are vulnerable due to urgency, right? Urgency creates an emotional response, and so a lot of times our models are detecting the anomalies in communications with the sense of tone and urgency. When you combine the two together, it seems suspicious, and our models can detect that, which is our language models that detect, for example, email security. With AI, it's slightly different, right? You can actually send four separate messages to AI and build a suspicious context. So our models are detecting that form of intent, which is, hey, what is happening over a period of time with the communication, because that's building an intent that looks suspicious. So it is difficult as well as different, but we haven't seen it yet. Okay, the good news is we haven't seen it yet, but I do suspect at this point in time, with the availability of agentic technologies in the hands of bad actors, it won't be too long before they start issuing, compromised attacks onto AI.
But your mission, the new mission, is to validate the intent, correct? So just conceptually, how do you do that? You look for those attempts to fool the machine, and and you stop that? I mean, it sounds like a very hard problem, and it's a very kind of fuzzy problem. Of course, AI is so probabilistic and fuzzy in its very
listen,
nature.
cybersecurity, and in particular how Proofpoint started, has always been fuzzy and probabilistic and non-deterministic.
Yep.
Okay, that by definition is the case.
So this is kind of market coming to you.
It's to some extent an extension of what we do. We've always done intent-based protection. We've always done using language models, detecting, is this communication intended for the wrong purpose? Okay, you can't do that with semantic analysis, Dave, anymore, because let's say if I'm a threat actor, and I'm intent to breaking through to you with a social engineering attack. Okay, in the past, when I didn't have generative AI solutions, I would write a message 5 times, and if I can't get through, then it'll be difficult for me to keep rewriting a message the 6th time, and semantic layer of protection was sufficient. So about 18 months ago, we created language models, which were intent-based protection, so that I can rewrite a message any number of times using generative technologies, and our models will detect the intent and block it. So that's what gave us confidence that even though the models have to be evolved, they are slightly different. The point of collection of signals as well as enforcement of guardrails are different for AI. But it's the promise, it's the domain knowledge, it's the expertise, it's what we do that gets extended from humans to AI. And if I'm a customer, I want to be able to see what's happening with human and AI working together as to the threats that are coming in from the outer world, and you're protected. And by the way, the same thing goes for insider risk, which is the 2 areas Proofpoint focuses on, external threats and insider threat, both of them being protected using the right intent of employees as well as AI.
So you're able to observe the behavior, and then what, the models learn from the reasoning traces of
our models today, for example, with our threat protections solutions, they learn from 2 ways. Okay, there are 2 ways of learning built into our models today. Firstly, they learn from our ever-growing threat intelligence. So we have threat researchers globally, and that threat researchers are assessing all the campaigns that are happening. And those campaigns are then getting fed back to our context engineering team, and that context engineering team is continually adding context. That happens on a day, like a million times a day. I mean, it's like every 20 minutes.
So it's virtually continuous.
It's continuous. Yeah. And then secondly, whenever any of our customer reports a message we missed, that feeds into both our context engineering team and our data engineering team. Depending on what kind of a campaign we missed, we then either update the model through training, which is twice a week, or if it's just a context that we have to give, we quickly add the context to the model, which is any time. And so the entire community is protecting each other. Anyone who reports a single campaign that we missed, our models learn.
So, I have so many questions. Your threat intel had to evolve,
of course,
to accommodate.
Of course.
Yes. Can you sort of explain?
We have seen now attacks issued on AI exploitation. So our threat intelligence is looking for signals to sort of see the various communications that are happening on different channels. And we start seeing that the patterns of communications that is eventually leading to some kind of a malicious intent, assessing not just a single message, but essentially building the context of what communication is happening. That's an example of evolution of our threat.
So we're all sort of enamored of these large language models, the big 4. And of course you see Zuckerberg trying to become 5 again. So the amount of investment that's going in there is just so impressive. But tell me more about your language models. Obviously you've got proprietary data and you want to leverage that to differentiate. How do you work with the research labs?
Yeah, we work closely with them.
What role do they play?
We don't start with our own models. We don't like go design our own frontier model or proprietary. We use our data for both context engineering and data engineering to take a model that's large and we really shrink it down to perform one function. And it's an ensemble approach where we have tested Because there are different types of threats. There could be fraud, there could be phishing, there could be, potentially malware. All these different types of attacks, if you try to have one big model and say, hey, can you answer the question of whether this is either of these, that may not be as efficient and can take up a lot of tokens and can spend a lot of cycles and time. But when you really ask them for discrete problems, have one model to answer one question, and have a sophisticated network of these models that are processing trillions of messages on an annual basis, then you get the combination of both speed as well as efficiency, because economics matter. At the end of the day, you won't want to spend tons of tokens to process whether every message is phishing or not, okay? So that's how we have built this whole model, but we don't build our own model. We start from one of the research labs models, and then we shrink it down.
So there's, one of the buzzwords, of course, is tokenomics.
Yeah.
We hear this all the time. Well, you remember that when the cloud first started, we didn't even really pay attention to the cost because it was so much less expensive than IT.
Yeah.
That's not anymore.
That's not the case, yeah.
But in tokens, people are much more sensitive to token consumption.
Yeah.
We were kind of joking, everybody's trying to open claw their business. And,
yeah.
And you're always watching how many tokens, and the big question is, okay, well, what kind of value are enterprises getting? What are you seeing, two-part question, what are you seeing in your world specifically? Because security's always had AI embedded.
100%.
Machine learning for sure, and so it's nothing really new to the industry. But what are you seeing in enterprises in terms of the value that they're getting? Are you seeing the return on that token spend? And you listen to Jensen, I don't know if you heard him last week, he said, if I have a $500,000 engineer and he or she is only spending $5,000 a year on tokens, I'm going to be really mad because I want them to consume tokens because that's intelligence and it sounds so good and it's so alluring. And then as you say, we try to apply it to your business, it's not so trivial if you have NVIDIA engineers running around. So what are you seeing for Proofpoint, and what are you seeing in your customer base?
I'd say firstly our product, when our product is using models and it's burning through tokens, obviously there I want the latest and the best efficacy, and there is a commitment we have made to the clients on protecting them. And if that means for a period of time we have to spend more tokens, we'll optimize them later is the approach I've taken.
Yeah.
Okay. On the usage by us as well as our customers, what I see, Dave, is there is spectrum that has emerged very rapidly. And there are, I think that spectrum will keep moving. There are customers who are saying that I'm keeping a close eye on it, but I don't care how much I'm spending. I'm focused on adoption, okay?
Yeah.
And I'd say that's kind of what Jensen was addressing last week when he said something about GGTC, and I'd say Proofpoint is in that bucket, where I'm keeping an eye on it, but I want my engineers and my sellers and my support engineers and even back office to go adopt, go use it. It's okay, there's no restrictions. We keep adding to the pool. And I think then at some point in time, we will determine what is the right token per employee. And then there are customers who are starting with a very slow approach, where they have enabled just one or two applications with a contained amount of usage to first measure the efficiency and return on investment. I personally think that the former approach is better. I do think right now is not the time to do return on investment measurements. Right now is the time to do adoption, experimentation, and quickly determining the fundamental business model and or business workflow transformation. Those are the two things that agentic technologies provide us. And that has to come a little bit bottom up. Just doing it top down may be limiting. So we have taken an approach, and we see other clients too, where we're encouraging adoption metrics, we are assessing the business workflow and business model transformation ideation come up, bottom up. And then we're going to come up with some kind of a model of tokens per role for a costing purposes at some point in time.
That you hire somebody, here's your laptop, here's your token budget.
But
so But so the top down, if I understand it, Sumit, is you, the CEO, saying, look, it's okay, experiment. John Furrier loves to invoke Andy Grove. Let chaos reign and then reign in the chaos. Now, as long as there's chaos in the sandbox,
yes,
that's okay.
Yes.
We're talking security here, but the bottom up is, okay, now let's find those high value use cases and then double down on
100%. By the way, this is the interesting part. You mentioned cybersecurity. To me, I feel like even when we are doing it, Acuvity, we implemented it for that reason, because we were like, okay, we want to democratize this chaos of usage of AI and ideation of AI, but that doesn't mean you don't have the guardrails. You still are providing the guardrails, because in the absence of the guardrails, AI just doesn't know what's right or wrong. And you can't let, in this democratized world when AI agents are getting developed and built for multitude of use cases, and many of them who may not survive for too long, you still want the guardrails to be consistent. You can't code them per agent. So it comes back to the whole need for AI security to support that innovation.
So, in a way, it's a pretty good time to be a private company with this whole SaaS apocalypse that everybody's talking about. What do you make of it, and what do you think are the biggest misconceptions that the market has? I mean, obviously seat-based pricing. I've been attacking seat-based pricing since seat-based pricing was introduced, so, it's easy to criticize that, but obviously you can see how that model, that lock-in model comes under fire. But there still seems to be a lot of innovation, obviously of a huge install base of software companies, but it's an interesting time. What do you make of it?
I think, this clearly, it blew out of proportion because every SaaS software was painted through the same brush. Will there be SaaS software that potentially are more simplistic workflow without any data advantage and may not be serving critical use cases in the enterprise that get challenged through pricing model, frontier models, maybe even vibe coding, possibly. But if you think about cybersecurity and Proofpoint within cybersecurity, that's quite different. Number one, vibe coding or frontier models are not necessarily practical approaches for something as critical as protecting humans and AI. Okay, it's nearly, I can't even think about whether there is any feasibility of it, but even if there were, as I mentioned, our models, they will not be practical without constant context engineering and the data. In fact, for a startup who were to build an alternative solution using models, even the public models, they won't have the data. Without that data, the economics and the weight of these models will be so big that unit economics won't work because customers still expect to pay a certain amount, and the efficacy suffers. Both of them will suffer, and there's delay, there's real latency that causes in real-time systems like email security. So to me, that along with incumbency, that creates network effect. The network effect keeps making the models better and better and better, and the gap between us and the alternatives keeps increasing. So to some extent, there's a reverse effect here. An incumbent cybersecurity solution that's providing real-time security using the underlying incumbent data and AI models, won't you benefit from all of this? So why to paint the whole category of software, which happens to be delivered through SaaS, through the exact same brush is just not right. And I think investors will understand it because customers certainly do. We don't see any patterns of change in customer demand. They're still equally interested in working with us in even richer and more depth. And right now, being private company, it's easier for us to go focus on that.
Right. Yeah. Well, I think that is a big misconception that the market has. It just paints everybody a SaaS company and then boom, it gets hit. Security's always been somewhat insulated from downturns. I mean, in general, and I think it's probably insulated from this as well. One of the other things we're watching, Sumit, in our research with our partner ETR, we've done this survey every year ahead of RSA, now RSAC, looking at consolidation of tools. And up until recently, there was no, Nikesh with his platformization story, up until recently, there was absolutely no evidence other than anecdotal, that was happening. We're starting to see some evidence in this way. I'll explain it this way. When you go back 2 years ago, I would say about 2/3 of the sample, a pretty large sample, many hundreds, said they were able to hold steady the number of tools in their AI or their security stack. Now that number's gone from 2/3 to probably other way around. 1/3, now 2/3 are able to hold steady. So that's at least an indication. It doesn't mean they're consolidating. Consolidation is actually probably different than platformization.
Yeah.
Two questions, are you seeing what are you seeing in terms of consolidation? And my second question is, my premise is you're insulated from that because you're not taking those big platforms on head on. You've got differentiation, and I want you to sort of dig into that and explain the differentiation.
Yeah, I'd say, I think underlying, listen, us as vendors, we can always have our own perspectives on what customers should do, but I always come back to what are the core factors from a customer's perspective they would do, right? From a customer's perspective, there are two factors that have happened. Over time, when the whole cloud and mobile era started, and the cyber became a sort of maybe very important aspect of adopting cloud and mobile, because all of a sudden your perimeter changed in a significant way. And when that happened, your risk surface area grew, and the new risks came popping from every place, and there was no solution provider to cover all these risks. So then you came a patchwork of products, and here we are in most enterprises anywhere between 60 to 100 plus tools that had to be adopted.
Right.
So that clearly is not sustainable. There should be fewer technologies and solutions, because when you have that many tools, is your cyber posture really, really more secure? Or you're just, because you got to operate all of that, and it could be that your entire posture is dependent on your lowest common denominator.
The weakest link.
It's the weakest link. Now, second thing is AI. AI comes in, and mindshare needs to move towards that. And mindshare has, and a little bit of wallet issue as well. How are they going to pay for all that? So based on both of those things, I'm seeing customers say, I have to go to fewer strategic partners. No one's saying, I don't see, hey, I'm just going to go all in with one, okay? I want to go to few strategic partners.
So how does that affect you?
And I think it's affecting us positively a little bit, because eventually it's emerging to 5 vertical stacks that customers are setting up. And let's call them 5 solution areas or 5 platforms that work with each other. Okay, no particular order, and I'm going to mention Proofpoint last. Endpoint and XDR. That's coming together, endpoint, cloud, security, all that stuff. Second would be, I would say, SOC automation. How would you do it in an agentic fashion, and do you need SIM, and SIM, SOC, automation all comes second. Identity, network and SASE. And then the fifth is human behavior and AI behavior, right? Because you need AI network, AI endpoint, AI automation, AI identity, and AI behavior. Same thing with human and AI behavior. And that's what we provide. And if you go to most enterprises, they will give you their strategic partner names that will be in those 5. But just because cyber teams haven't really thought about what are my consolidated platforms, oftentimes what I find myself is when I have these conversations with CISOs, they say, I like that, or even CIOs, I like it. I'm already sort of doing it, so why not formalize it? And then it's just about integration, it's about economics. So how it helps us is, there are a lot of satellite technologies around email security that customers have purchased. So now we have sedimented them into our platform, our pricing model. So from a cost perspective, better security, integrated experience perspective, we call it Prime. And now it extends to our data security platform. You can just use it as an integrated platform for human behavior, both for inbound and outbound protection. And that helps us a little bit. Obviously, we have to showcase that to the customers and take them on the path and make them successful with that journey. But we can provide real value on economics, integration, and higher security.
And I know you got to run, but where would you put posture management within those five?
I think
Is
broad posture management on cloud posture, I would say at the endpoint.
Yeah.
But I would say data posture is related to full data security solution. Okay, so that's how I would do it, because the posture is a holistic thing. There's an identity posture, there's an endpoint posture. It's part of everything. It's part of everything. Yeah.
Sumit, thank you so much for coming.
Always
on.
great.
Really great
It's
to see you. Come and
always
see us in New York. We'd love to have you back there.
Will do. Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome, and thank you for watching. This is theCUBE's coverage of RSAC 2026. We're here at Moscone West. Keep it right there. We'll be right back right after this short break.